Close your eyes. Allow the weight of your body to sink deeply into the surface beneath you. Feel every muscle begin to release its grip, slowly surrendering to gravity. Sink down, down into the profound and ancient quiet of the past. Let the present world simply melt away into the shadows, leaving behind the noise, the rush, and the endless demands of the modern era. Picture yourself stepping backward through the centuries, shedding the years like layers of heavy clothing. You are drifting away from everything you know, floating gently across the vast, silent ocean of time, untethered and entirely at peace. It is October in the year 1780. You are entirely safe, nestled deep within the embrace of a sturdy thatch hut on a remote Caribbean island. The walls around you are a fortress of solitude, built by hand to withstand the temperamental moods of the tropics. But the night is profoundly different from any you have experienced before. The air has changed in a way that bypasses logic and speaks directly to your primal senses. It is not the usual gentle tropical evening filled with the soft lullabies of the tide. It is a night defined by an absolute, undeniable weight. It is as if the sky itself has physically descended, pressing down upon the island with a quiet, invisible authority. The humidity is a physical presence in the room, almost liquid in its density. It hangs in the darkness, thick and suffocating, draping over you like a heavily woven blanket of warm vapor. You can feel it settling on your bare skin, leaving a fine, dewy sheen that never quite evaporates. It clings to the rough-hewn linens, to the raw wood of the simple furniture, and to the very floorboards beneath you. This moisture holds the ambient heat close, refusing to let the night cool. You are wrapped entirely in this sweltering embrace, suspended in a warm, atmospheric bath that demands your complete, unresisting surrender. With every slow, deliberate breath you take, you can feel the dense, waterlogged air entering your lungs. It expands in your chest, heavy and deeply warming. It is so rich with moisture that breathing feels like drinking from the atmosphere itself, a slow, rhythmic pulling of water vapor into the deepest chambers of your body. There is no breeze to break the spell. There is no draft sneaking through the cracks of the wooden door. The trade winds, which usually dance across the island, rustling the palms and sweeping across the heated earth to bring sweet relief, have entirely abandoned the sky. They have vanished without a trace, leaving a hollow void where the air's momentum used to be. The air does not move. It simply sits, heavy, warm, oppressive. It presses against your skin with a gentle but unyielding pressure, blurring the very boundary between where your body ends and the night begins. You become one with the stillness, dissolving into the stagnant warmth that fills the small room. The atmosphere feels pregnant, charged with an unspoken electric tension that makes the invisible hairs on your arms stand on end, even in the sweltering heat. It is a sensation of being suspended in amber, perfectly preserved in a moment of meteorological paralysis, waiting for a release that has not yet come. This stillness is deceptive. It is an eerie, unnatural quiet that has settled over the entire island, commanding everything to hold its breath in terrified reverence. The vast, sprawling jungle that surrounds your clearing, usually a chaotic, vibrant symphony of calls, chirps, rustling leaves, and restless nocturnal life, is draped in a tense, expectant silence. The tree frogs have ceased their rhythmic singing. The night birds have hidden themselves deep within the darkest parts of the canopy. The towering mahogany trees and the great sweeping ferns stand frozen, as if cast in solid iron against the black sky. Not a single leaf shivers, not a single vine sways. The wilderness senses the profound, impending drop in pressure, and in its ancient wisdom, it cowers, offering no resistance to the heavy night. In this profound absence of wind, your senses turn naturally inward, drawn away from the vast, silent outdoors and into the organic, intimate symphony of the hut itself. Without the distraction of the whispering jungle, your hearing becomes acutely, powerfully sharp. The structure around you feels alive, a living entity reacting to the dense moisture in the dead calm. You are resting within the belly of a sleeping beast, protected and secure, while the walls themselves respond to the shifting, invisible, barometric tide of the sky. Surrounding you are thick walls formed from packed earth, river mud, and crushed coral. During the long, merciless hours of the day, these walls baked in the fierce, relentless sun, acting as a great thermal battery. Now, in the dark, they are slowly exhaling that trapped warmth back into the stagnant air, radiating a gentle baking heat that warms you to your bones. You can smell the rich, loamy scent of the damp earth, a grounding, ancient aroma mixed with the faint, salty tang of dried riverbed and crushed stone. This primal scent tethers you safely to the floor, reminding you of the solid, enduring ground beneath you. Occasionally, the mud cracks ever so slightly as it settles and cools in the microscopic ways it can, letting out a soft, dry tick that echoes softly in the small, enclosed space. It is a comforting sound, a sound of the earth resting, shifting its ancient weight in the dark. Look up, in your mind's eye, to the roof above. It is woven from hundreds of dried palm fronds, layered impossibly thick and bound tight with fibrous vines to keep out the harsh tropical elements. Usually, these fronds whisper and scratch against one another in the nightly breeze, singing a dry, papery song as the air moves through them. Tonight, they are perfectly motionless, suspended in the thick black air above your head. The intricate latticework of dried leaves forms a protective canopy, a reliable shield against the heavy sky, yet it appears completely paralyzed by the utter lack of wind. Yet, even in the absolute stillness, the thatch speaks. The heavy, suffocating humidity is seeping deeply into the dried organic matter. The brittle, sun-scorched fibers of the palm leaves are greedily drinking in the moisture from the thick air, swelling and softening in the dark. This transformation is invisible to the eye, but unmistakably present to the ear. As the fibers expand with the water vapor, they slowly shift against each other, constrained by their tight, ancient bindings. The entire roof is undergoing a slow, silent metamorphosis, relaxing its brittle posture as it absorbs the night. You hear a faint, almost imperceptible creak, then a gentle, papery rustle like the slow turning of an ancient, heavy parchment page. It is the sound of the hut breathing with you. A tiny shift of a swollen fiber here, a subtle settling of a heavy, damp wooden beam there. These tiny, granular sounds are magnified tenfold by the suffocating silence of the world outside. The dead calm acts as a giant acoustic dome, capturing the microscopic, organic movements of the dried palm and the earthen walls. Every subtle tick, every soft sigh of the wood wraps you tighter in a cocoon of earthy, organic warmth, lulling you deeper into the safe, timeless heart of the storm's silent preamble. Feel the heavy air resting on your chest. Let it ground you completely, anchoring your physical form to the solid earth beneath. It is a weighted blanket woven from the tropical night itself, dense with invisible moisture and ancient heat. There is nowhere else you need to be in this vast, sprawling world. There is nothing to do but exist purely and simply within this heavy, motionless pocket of time. The thick air holds you securely in place, an unwavering embrace that demands nothing but your surrender. The profound silence wraps around you, a cocoon woven from the absence of sound, isolating you from the distant centuries of the future. You are enveloped entirely in the deep, earthy scent of the baked mud walls, a primordial fragrance that speaks of sun-drenched riverbeds and crushed stones. Above you, the soft, fibrous presence of the thatch roof hovers like a protective canopy, guarding your rest in the heavy, unmoving heart of this 1780s Caribbean night. You remain suspended in this thick, unyielding stillness, floating in a sea of stagnant warmth. The heavy moisture continues to press against you, a solid, warm mass resting comfortably and reassuringly upon your chest, regulating your breathing to match its slow, sluggish pace. The world outside the timber door is profoundly asleep, perfectly trapped and preserved in the dark, warm amber of this motionless Caribbean night. But as you lie there, anchored so utterly to the packed earthen floor, a new, entirely different sensation begins to seep slowly into the outermost fringes of your awareness. It does not arrive through the thick, suffocating air above you. The air remains stubbornly dead, completely silent and overwhelmingly heavy, refusing to carry even the ghost of a sound. Instead, this new, mysterious presence travels through a much denser medium. It moves through the very bedrock of the island itself. It is a vibration buried far, far beneath the fertile topsoil and the layers of ancient limestone. It is a subterranean tremor, so immensely deep, so profoundly vast, and so impossibly low in its pitch that you cannot hear it with your ears. You feel it. You feel it radiating upward from the dark, compressed earth, passing through the floorboards and the woven mat beneath you. It enters your physical form stealthily, resonating softly and continuously within the very marrow of your bones. It is a tactile whisper from the deep earth, a rumbling secret shared only with those completely still enough to receive it, bypassing the auditory world entirely to speak directly to your skeletal core. Miles and miles away, out in the fathomless black expanse of the open Atlantic, where the water is unimaginably deep and devoid of light, the ocean is beginning to swell. A colossal, unseen energy is gathering in the desolate wastes of the sea, pushing a massive, silent wall of deep water relentlessly toward the shallow coastal reefs of your island sanctuary. The sheer, terrifying weight of this approaching surge is displacing millions upon millions of tons of water, compressing the ocean floor itself. This immense transfer of mass is sending long, agonizingly slow, low-frequency shockwaves rippling out across the tectonic plates, traveling through the very crust of the Earth long before the storm itself even threatens to breach the visible horizon. The rhythm of this distant aquatic surge is deeply hypnotic in its slow, agonizing power. It manifests as a low, continuous thrum, a deep, vibrating chord held for an eternity, followed by long, stretching minutes of empty, expectant silence, and then, invariably, The thrum returns. It vibrates with a terrifying gentleness through the soles of your feet, traveling up the calves and settling into the base of your spine. It is the very heartbeat of the deep ocean, steady, ancient, unfathomably vast, and completely unstoppable, pulsing blindly through the darkness of the subterranean world. As this invisible seismic energy pulses rhythmically through the solid ground beneath you, the stagnant, suffocating heat trapped within the confines of the hut begins, ever so slightly, to fracture. It is the most subtle, delicate of changes, almost imperceptible to an untrained mind. It is an invisible shift in the very fabric of the atmospheric pressure pressing down on the roof. The immense barometric weight of the air, which has held you pinned in heat all night, is suddenly plummeting, stretching the atmosphere thin and taut like a drawn bowstring. And then, in the absolute quiet, it happens. A single, solitary whisper of cooler air slips secretly through a microscopic fissure in the dried, baked mud wall. It is not a breeze. It lacks the chaotic energy of wind. It is merely a phantom draft, a hyper-localized drop in temperature that behaves like a heavy liquid, pooling quietly and invisibly near the earthen floor. Yet against the stifling, blood-warm humidity that has completely dominated the room for hours, this sudden intrusion of coolness is utterly startling. It brushes delicately, almost hesitantly against your fevered cheek, carrying with it a strange, alien scent from a world far beyond the jungle edge. The familiar, comforting, earthy smell of the mud walls is suddenly violently undercut by the sharp, electric, metallic tang of atmospheric ozone, mingling heavily with the bitter, crushed, violent scent of deep-sea brine and churning kelp. The phantom coolness breathes slowly across your skin, bringing a profound, almost intoxicatingly soothing relief to the oppressive, stagnant heat that has held you captive. It glides like cool silk, pooling gently around your exposed shoulders, creating a stark, shivering contrast to the heavy, suffocating thermal blanket of the enclosed room. The entire atmosphere of the hut is violently shifting, invisibly realigning its molecules, pulling away the old heat and making way for something immense, powerful, and undeniably ancient. The very structural bones of your sanctuary sense this invisible, terrifying realignment of the heavens. The heavy, hand-hewn wooden supports, thick, unyielding trunks of ancient island mahogany that were driven deep into the bedrock generations ago, register the precipitous, sudden drop in barometric pressure. They have stood stoically in this damp earth for decades, cured to iron hardness by the relentless sun and the corrosive salt of the sea air. But tonight is different. Tonight, the sudden, violent change in the air's density, combined with the subterranean tremors, forces them to react. Deep within their petrified heartwood, microscopic fibers begin to flex and groan, a silent, structural bracing against the invisible weight of the plunging barometer, preparing themselves for the wrath of the shifting sky. From the darkest, most impenetrable corner of the room, a long, drawn-out ache emanates from the very soul of the timber, a deep, resonant groan that seems to articulate centuries of endurance. It is the unmistakable sound of immense, invisible weight settling upon the bones of the shelter. The thick wooden pillars, ancient island mahogany that has weathered generations of harsh sun and salt spray, twist ever so fractionally in the suffocating dark. You can almost hear their dense petrified fibers stretching and compressing, protesting and adapting as the immense, invisible gravity of the approaching storm pulls relentlessly at the swollen sky above. Another groan follows, slower and more agonizing this time, a deep, rich, woody creak that stretches out for seconds, vibrating audibly through the quiet, trapped space. It is as if the thick beams are speaking directly to the earth, answering the low, rhythmic thrum of the ocean surge miles away with a slow, grinding language of their own. Despite this violent structural symphony, the air inside the hut remains utterly, stubbornly still. The layers of dried palm fronds above do not rustle. They hang suspended like a breath caught in the throat. The dense jungle outside continues to hold its terrified collective breath, paralyzed by the plunging barometer. Yet the atmospheric tension is mounting exponentially, becoming almost too heavy to bear. You are caught in the beautiful, terrifying liminal space, the razor-thin boundary between the stagnant, suffocating calm and the approaching world-altering force. Breathe in that sudden, sharp coolness that has begun to pool around your ankles. Let the deep, guttural, ancient groans of the mahogany beams reassure you of their steadfast strength, their absolute refusal to yield. Feel the low, rhythmic vibration of the Atlantic surge continuing to massage the earth deep beneath you, offering a heavy, hypnotic lullaby from the lightless depths of the ocean, a steady bass line echoing through the unmoving, breathless dark. The cool, ozone-laced draft continues to pool around you, rising slowly like a tide of invisible, chilled water. It is a silent, creeping herald of the immense, unimaginable weight suspended directly above the fragile island. The sky above the thatch, though invisible to your eyes, has become a swollen, bruised canopy, bursting with millions of tons of ocean water drawn up into the darkness by the storm's churning engine. The tension in the breathless air is absolute, a physical pressure against your eardrums. It is a world holding tightly to a fragile, invisible boundary, vibrating with the anticipation of an inevitable, violent release. And then, without warning or fanfare, that absolute boundary breaks. Gravity finally overcomes the surface tension of the bloated clouds high above the canopy. A single, solitary drop of water, impossibly fat, stinging cold and laden with the weight of the sea, plummets violently through the pitch-black sky. It falls for thousands of feet through the stagnant, humid air, gathering terrible momentum, slicing through the oppressive heat until it strikes the very center of the thatched roof directly above your resting head. The impact is startlingly loud, a gunshot in the dead, expectant quiet. It does not splash softly. Instead, it strikes the bone-dry, sun-baked palm fronds with a hollow, resonant thwack that reverberates through the rafters. For a long, drawn-out moment, there is only the lingering echo of that single, definitive impact. The silence that follows is even deeper than before, pregnant with the promise of more. You can almost hear the microscopic, brittle, papery fibers of the palm leaves greedily absorbing that concentrated sphere of moisture. The dry thatch hisses ever so slightly in the dark, a microscopic crackle as the dead, desiccated leaves suddenly swell and soften around the damp, spreading impact crater. Then, the silence is broken again. Another drop falls, a heavy, definitive, isolating strike on the steep, sloping left side of the roof. A third drop hits near the low-hanging eaves, then a fourth, striking the ridgeline. They do not arrive in a sudden, overwhelming rush. They fall with agonizing, deliberate slowness, establishing a careful metronomic cadence in the dark. It is a slow, hypnotic drumming, played by the hand of the storm itself. Tap, tap, tap. Each strike is entirely distinct, separated by a gulf of breathless silence. Each drop is a heavy, globular weight of cold water, transferring its kinetic energy directly into the organic, woven shell of your sanctuary, announcing the absolute end of the drought. Listen closely to the evolving texture of the sound. As the brittle palm fronds begin to thoroughly dampen, the acoustic nature of the impacts fundamentally changes. The sharp, papery crack of the very first drops gradually softens, melting into a deeper, rounder, more resonant thud. The roof is greedily drinking the sky, absorbing the deluge into its very architecture. The dry, scratchy, inflexible fibers are yielding completely to the wetness, physically transforming from a rigid, drum-like barrier into a soft, damp, heavy sponge that cushions the blow of the falling water. With this gentle, rhythmic tapping comes a profound, undeniable shift in the atmosphere of the room. The suffocating, dusty heat that has choked you for hours is finally, mercifully broken. The scent that follows is intoxicating, a sudden, overwhelming rush to the senses. The first heavy drops of rain, violently kicking up the microscopic layers of dust settled on the roof, release a potent, dizzying wave of petrichor. It is the deep, sweet, complex perfume of parched earth and starved vegetation finally receiving a desperate drink. The rich smell of crushed green leaves, wet bark, ozone, and ancient turned soil floods the small, dark space, violently washing away the stagnant, sour humidity. You breathe it in, deeply and slowly, feeling the fresh, oxygen-rich, rain-washed moisture fill your lungs, instantly clearing your mind and cooling your blood. As the slow, rhythmic percussion continues its hypnotic tempo above your head, your awareness drifts slowly downward, sinking away from the roof and anchoring your body firmly to the ground. The earthen floor beneath you, packed hard as stone by years of human use and baked completely dry by the relentless tropical sun, is beginning its own silent transformation. The ground outside the hut, exposed to the open sky, is already eagerly drinking in the heavy, methodical drops, and that seeping moisture is slowly, inevitably creeping inward. It travels by capillary action, wicking silently under the thick, mud-plastered walls and saturating the perimeter of your room. Through the woven mat beneath you, you can feel the temperature of the packed earth subtly, gradually dropping, a creeping coolness that rises up from the soil to embrace your skin, locking you safely into the profound, cooling peace of the breaking storm. The packed earthen floor beneath you is slowly, silently exhaling its long-stored heat. It releases the memory of the scorching daytime sun, replacing that stifling warmth with a deep, subterranean mineral coolness that seeps steadily upward, sinking directly into your heavy, resting muscles. Where the earth beneath your woven mat was once a hard, rigid, unforgiving crust, baked to the consistency of fired brick, the creeping, invisible dampness of the approaching storm is working a slow, miraculous alchemy. You can sense the physical change occurring directly beneath your spine. The stubborn surface tension of the packed dirt finally surrenders, relaxing its tight, arid grip. You can almost feel the microscopic grains of dry, crushed clay beginning to loosen their rigid bonds, eagerly absorbing the rich ambient moisture that now hangs so heavy and saturated in the air. The floor itself is softening, transforming beneath the weight of your body. It is transitioning, grain by microscopic grain, from a solid, dusty, unyielding surface into a cool, exquisitely yielding layer of dark, rich mud. This is the primal earth waking up, returning to its most elemental state, summoned by the falling barometer and the weeping sky. This softening, dampening earth gently cradles you, As the moisture permeates the top layer of the floor, the ground molds ever so slightly, ever so perfectly to the heavy, relaxed contours of your resting form. It creates a bespoke hollow for your shoulders, a soft, yielding depression for your heels, offering a gentle, cooling embrace directly from the living island itself. The damp soil acts as a perfect conductor, carrying a deep, grounding vibration from the island's core, a steady, ancient hum that anchors your fragile human form safely and permanently to the deep limestone bedrock below. You are perfectly, flawlessly suspended between two immensely powerful natural elements, held in absolute safety in the eye of the transition. Above you, the slow, rhythmic, deeply hypnotic drumming of the heavy rain continues its work, methodically softening the thick palm thatch roof into a heavy, wet shield. Below you, the ancient cooling earth continues softening into wet, pliable clay, holding you securely in place, slowly and deliberately drawing the last of the lingering, anxious heat from your body, down into the dark, endlessly damp ground. In this fleeting, perfect moment, the rest of the world ceases to exist. There is only the steady, methodical tap of the water above and the rich mineral cool of the mud below. You are completely cocooned in this beautiful, profound sensory transition, tucked safely away in the absolute dark, an invisible observer as the parched island drinks in the first gentle, life-giving offerings of the approaching tropical storm. But the storm is a living thing, and it does not rest. The deliberate, rhythmic tapping that had coaxed the earth into such comforting softness suddenly begins to multiply, compounding upon itself with alarming speed. The quiet, empty space between the heavy drops entirely collapses. The slow, metronomic cadence of the early rain, which had fallen with such perfect vertical precision from the bruised, breathless sky, slowly and inevitably shatters. An invisible, violently lateral force has suddenly rushed into the dark, silent expanse of the jungle. The absent trade winds have finally returned, but they are no longer the gentle, cooling breezes of the afternoon. They have been twisted, pressurized, and corrupted into something vast and completely unrecognizable. The water is no longer simply dropping from the clouds. It is being driven like a weapon. It is swept up in a furious, blindingly fast, rushing current of moving air, weaponized by the gale. You can hear the exact terrifying moment the entire trajectory of the storm shifts on its axis. The heavy, resonant vertical thuds on the high apex of the roof are instantaneously replaced by a frantic horizontal pelting against the windward eastern wall of your sanctuary. The sound is deafening and chaotic. It sounds precisely as though tens of thousands of tiny, wet pebbles are being continuously and violently hurled against the packed earthen plaster and the tightly woven palm fronds. The rain is no longer falling. It is lashing the side of the fragile hut with a blind, desperate, furious aggression, seeking desperately to find a way inside. Yet, beneath the chaotic, overwhelming clatter of the driving horizontal rain, the true, terrifying voice of the wind finally emerges from the dark. It begins almost cautiously as a low, mournful, haunting whistle, a phantom breath dragging itself forcefully through the dense, resisting foliage of the ancient mahogany and banyan trees outside. It is a thin, hollow, ghostly sound that slithers like a serpent through the pitch-black, thrashing jungle canopy. But as the atmospheric pressure continues its severe, unprecedented plunging descent, as the true eye of the hurricane draws nearer, that hollow, ghostly whistle begins to violently climb in both pitch and volume, demanding to be heard over the deluge. The whistle deepens into a howl. It broadens, aggressively catching on the sharp woven edges of the thatch roof and the rough textured bark of the exterior supporting beams. It swells rapidly from a high, reedy, frantic hiss into a thick, guttural, agonizing moan, and then, inexorably, unstoppably, into a steady, world-ending, vibrating roar.
The air outside your thin walls is no longer just empty space or a gentle breeze. It has violently transformed into a massive, heavy, kinetic river of raw atmospheric pressure. It is a dark, invisible flood roaring continuously across the terrified surface of the island, an apocalyptic force attempting to scour the very earth clean of anything that dares to stand upright. Yet as the chaotic, destructive energy outside reaches a terrifying, deafening crescendo, the absolute brilliance, the ancient indigenous wisdom of your shelter reveals itself to you. This humble hut is not a rigid, unyielding fortress of brittle stone or rigid brick that might crack and shatter under such immense pressure. It is a beautifully organic vessel. It breathes with the wind, it flexes with the pressure, and it profoundly understands the nature of the storm. The thick, damp mud walls and the intricately, masterfully layered palm fronds do not stubbornly, foolishly resist the gale. Rather, they lean into it, absorbing its immense kinetic fury. As the wind slams into the windward wall, you can feel the entire structure subtly shudder, a deep, protective, resonant vibration that travels safely down the thick mahogany posts, passes harmlessly into the cooling, damp earth, and thrums directly, comfortingly into the center of your resting bones, whispering a promise of absolute safety amidst the roaring chaos of the Caribbean night. The storm is frantically clawing at the exterior, a blind, many-fingered beast desperately searching for a weakness in the armor of your shelter. It tears at the corners and hammers at the foundation, but the porous, earthy shell of your cocoon acts as an ancient, masterful shield, a technology born of the island itself. The hurricane winds slam against the windward wall with the force of a collapsing ocean, desperately seeking entry, but the thick, matted layers of dried vegetation, crushed coral, and baked clay simply refuse to break. Instead, they break the wind's back. The violent kinetic energy is masterfully diffused by the sheer density of the earth. The howling, solid wall of air is forced to splinter, shattering into thousands of harmless, disjointed currents, filtering through 1,000 microscopic crevices in the rough mud and the tight, intricate weave of the palm thatch. What finally reaches you, deep inside the dark, heavy belly of the room, is a marvel of atmospheric transformation. The violent, deadly gale is entirely stripped of its fangs. It is reduced to a soft, rhythmic, almost apologetic sigh that circulates gently in the enclosed shadowed space. The aggressive horizontal sheets of driving rain that are currently drowning the jungle outside, violently snapping branches and flooding the ancient roots, are blocked entirely from your sanctum. Instead, the immense, relentless pressure of the wind forces the rainwater through the very finest, microscopic pores of the thick earth walls, atomizing the heavy liquid instantly upon entry. A fine, nearly imperceptible mist blooms silently in the dark, heavy air of the hut. It is a cooling, freshwater spray, lighter than a breath, that delicately kisses your fevered cheeks, your neck, and your resting forearms. It carries with it the intense, crushed, bleeding, resinous scent of a vast jungle being violently pruned by the wind, a chaotic perfume of snapped vines, torn bark, and bruised leaves,
perfectly, harmoniously blended with the deep, grounding mineral smell of the wet clay walls surrounding you. This suspended mist acts as a soothing medicinal balm against your skin, a phantom, gentle touch of the storm that has been miraculously tamed, filtered, and softened just for you. The louder the chaos shrieks and batters against the outside world, the more profound, absolute, and unshakable your safety feels within. The continuous, vibrating roar of the hurricane completely envelops the structure, transforming into an overwhelming, monolithic wall of white noise. It is a heavy, sonic blanket that erases all thought, isolating you entirely from the anxieties of the future and the regrets of the past. You are tucked deep into the fragrant, damp earth, held securely in this dark, warm, humid pocket of pure survival, peacefully listening to the magnificent, terrifying, godlike power of the sky being kept safely at bay by mud and wood.
Yet, the storm continues to grow. The vibrating roar that surrounds you swells into something truly monstrous, something that defies human comprehension. The immense kinetic energy outside builds to an absolute brain-rattling zenith. It is no longer just wind and rain, it is a solid, crushing, planetary monolith of sound, an acoustic pressure that feels heavier than the ocean. The ancient mahogany beams groan in sheer, sustained agony, vibrating fiercely against the packed earth, acting as massive wooden tuning forks resonating with the frequency of destruction. The tightly woven palm fronds scream under the unbelievable burning friction of the gale, a high-pitched, desperate wail woven into the bass of the wind. The noise becomes an impenetrable, deafening blanket, a chaotic, vibrating frequency that buzzes the fluid in your inner ear, rattles your teeth in your skull, and shakes the very marrow of your resting, heavy bones. The violence is everywhere, all-consuming, absolute. And then, the monolith shatters. It is not a gradual fading. It is not a slow, merciful retreat of the wind or a softening of the rain. It is an immediate, violent, and absolute cessation of noise. It happens in the space of a single staggered heartbeat. The howling shrieks vanish into thin air as if a cord has been cut. The aggressive horizontal battering of the rain against the mud walls is instantly surgically severed. It is as if a massive, invisible, impossibly thick dome of glass has suddenly slammed down from the heavens over the entire island, smothering the unfathomable fury in an instant.
The sudden, catastrophic absence of the roaring chaos leaves a dizzying, ringing, cavernous vacuum in your ears. Your brain, having just fought to process the deafening roar, now scrambles to make sense of the absolute nothingness. You have crossed the threshold. You have slipped violently and seamlessly through the churning, deadly inner eyewall of the great storm and emerged directly into the dead, unblinking center of the vortex, the eye. The barometric pressure, which had plummeted for hours to impossible, crushing, suffocating depths, suddenly and shockingly stabilizes in a bizarre, breathless trough. You can physically feel the pressure lift from your eardrums with a faint internal pop, leaving behind a hollow, dizzying, floating weightlessness. Your body feels impossibly light, as if the gravity of the earth has been momentarily suspended. The air inside the hut, previously circulating with that fine cooling mist, is completely, stubbornly stagnant once again. But it is deeply cooled, washed entirely clean of the dust and the stagnant heat by the violence that has just passed. It is pure, rarefied air, tasting of deep ocean ozone and the high stratosphere, trapped perfectly in this transient, moving cylinder of calm. The pitch-black darkness of the hut feels impossibly heavy now, almost suffocating in its completeness. Without the chaotic white noise of the gale to aggravately occupy your overloaded, exhausted senses, the silence itself becomes a physical entity. It becomes deafening.
It is a haunting, suffocating stillness that presses against your skin. It is a terrifying, pregnant pause in the timeline of the night, a suspension of reality. You are resting precisely in the epicenter of the most destructive atmospheric force on Earth, cocooned helplessly in a bubble of absolute, deceptive calm. The psychological tension of this dark, perfectly silent waiting room is thick enough to touch, a heavy, invisible syrup filling the space from floor to ceiling. You know, with a deep, primal, undeniable certainty echoing in the slow, heavy thud of your own heartbeat, that the beast is not dead. It is not gone. It is merely pausing, circling you, drawing its massive, watery breath before the second assault. You are trapped beautifully, powerlessly, in the void. In this vast, cavernous, unnerving silence, where the roar of the wind has been erased, the microscopic world slowly, hesitantly reclaims the auditory space. Your hearing adjusts, expanding outward into the quiet. The mighty world-ending hurricane has vanished from your ears, replaced entirely by the immediate, intimate, granular aftermath of its passing. Focus your attention upward into the pitch-black rafters. Above you, in the dark, the thick, deeply layered palm thatch is completely, utterly saturated. Millions upon millions of individual, once brittle fibers are now bloated, swollen, and impossibly heavy with trapped cold rainwater. They have drunk their fill, absorbing the sheer weight of the storm until they can hold not a single drop more.
Slowly, inevitably, the inescapable, patient pull of gravity begins its work. It begins to gently coax, to draw this heavy, accumulated moisture downward through the intricate, sodden layers of the woven ceiling. In the absolute, ringing silence of the hurricane's eye, a new sound begins. It is the soft, rhythmic, delicate weeping of the roof, the sound of water surrendering to the earth, a gentle ticking in the dark that measures the agonizingly slow passage of time in the heart of the void. Focus your mind's eye on the absolute darkness above. High in the unseen rafters, a single swollen droplet gathers slowly at the jagged, broken tip of a saturated frond deep within the roof's intricate woven structure. It swells with agonizing patience. It grows steadily heavier, fatter, perfectly spherical in the pitch black, mercilessly pulling the fragile tip of the dead palm leaf downward. The fiber strains under the minuscule weight until finally the delicate surface tension breaks. It detaches, a tiny, perfect globe of cold, fresh water plummeting through the dead, stagnant air of the hut. It strikes the floor just inches from your resting hand, but the floor is no longer the packed, dusty, dry earth of yesterday. Through the silent alchemy of the storm, it has become a beautifully soft, yielding layer of dark, richly scented wet mud. The heavy drop hits this softened surface not with a splash, but with a thick, viscous, deeply organic sound. It is a heavy, wet thwack that resonates beautifully and clearly in the suffocating, silent vacuum of the room. It is a lonely, deeply isolated sound, the solitary punctuation mark at the end of a long, terrifying sentence. It emphasizes just how utterly alone you are in this pocket of peace. A breathless pause stretches out, and then another drop falls from a different, unseen beam. A fat, heavy, satisfying plop near the eastern wall where the wind had beaten the hardest. Then another falls, striking the curved edge of a forgotten, carved wooden bowl left in the corner. It rings out with a hollow, resonant tink, a musical wooden chime that hangs in the heavy air. This is the slow, mournful symphony of weeping architecture. The humble hut is literally bleeding the storm out onto the forgiving earth beneath it. The rhythm of these falling drops is entirely random, entirely organic, completely devoid of the malicious driving force of the wind that brought them here. Each dripping echo, each hollow chime only serves to amplify and emphasize the profound, terrifying, eerie quiet that has so completely hijacked the tropical night. Without the moon, without the stars, without the chorus of the jungle, these solitary drips are the only clock you have left. They are a liquid metronome, steadily ticking away the borrowed seconds as you lie trapped in the unblinking eye of the monster. You lie perfectly, intentionally still, anchored deeply and willingly into the wet, incredibly fragrant mud. You listen to the heavy water randomly fall around you, mapping the dimensions of the room purely by sound. You are completely suspended in the haunted, incredibly fragile equilibrium of the eye, breathing in the deeply cold, damp, miraculously ozone-rich air that tastes of the upper atmosphere. There is nothing left for you to do but completely surrender your body and your mind to the dark. You are entirely, acutely present in this terrifying, staggeringly beautiful pocket of pure silence, waiting with the patience of the ancient stones for the other side of the roaring wall to inevitably return. The heavy, wet plop of a single cold water drop striking the mud. Another hollow wooden tink echoing endlessly against the carved bowl. The rhythm is intensely hypnotic, a fragile, deeply organic metronome counting down the few precious borrowed seconds you have left in the void. You lie completely, wonderfully surrendered to the damp, cooling earth that holds your weight, breathing in the rich, intoxicating, heavy scent of crushed atmospheric ozone and deeply saturated soil. The silence of the eye is an absolute, physically heavy curtain draped completely over the terrified, waiting world outside your walls. But as you listen, you realize with a cold thrill that the thick curtain is beginning to fray. It does not begin with a gentle breeze or a rustling leaf. It begins, once again, not in the air, but as a profound, undeniable physical sensation deep within the delicate, sensitive structures of your inner ear. The hollow, dizzying, weightless piece of the extreme low-pressure center is suddenly, abruptly squeezed. A sharp, violent, undeniable spike in the barometric pressure aggressively presses inward against your eardrums. It is a heavy, invisible, atmospheric hand firmly announcing that your sanctuary in the void is rapidly collapsing. The massive atmospheric anomaly is shifting, sliding its unimaginable bulk continuously across the terrified island, and the breathless, suspended animation of the dripping jungle is about to be brutally, completely shattered. Beneath the intimate, quiet, isolated sounds of the weeping thatch and the hollow bowl, a new, deeply terrifying frequency bleeds ominously into the pitch-black room. At first, it is so distant, so impossibly deep and vast that it does not register as sound at all. It registers only as a cold, fearful vibration shivering directly into your jawbone and your collarbones, a low, continuous, sub-audible hum. It is the inescapable sound of the opposite eye wall approaching, a towering, churning, impenetrable colossus of absolutely unbridled atmospheric violence. It is rapidly, hungrily chewing through the remaining miles of dark, saturated jungle that lie defenseless between its raw power and your fragile earthen sanctuary. The creeping, primal dread becomes a tangible, physically heavy weight hanging in the suddenly cold air. You find yourself gently, firmly pinned to the mud floor by the sheer, magnificent, paralyzing anticipation of the returning Leviathan. The deep, bone-rattling hum broadens significantly, rising aggressively from the trembling earth beneath you and completely filling the stagnant, trapped air of the hut. It rapidly transforms from a mere seismic vibration into a terrible, all-consuming, apocalyptic drone. It sounds exactly like an entire bottomless ocean falling directly from the sky, a continuous, deafening, unstoppable avalanche of crushed water and violent air obliterating absolutely everything in its path. It is rushing closer by the second. The slow, peaceful, hypnotic dripping of the roof is entirely, instantly swallowed by the immense approaching acoustic shadow of the eye wall. You instinctively press your spine deeper, harder into the soft, yielding mud floor, desperately bracing your fragile human body against the unyielding strength of the earth. You know, with the deep, inherited primal instinct of the island running through your veins, that the storm will not return from the battered east. The vast, swirling vortex has passed directly over you, and the trailing edge of the monstrous eye is rotating in complete, devastating geographical opposition. The beast has silently circled around in the pitch blackness to strike your unassuming sanctuary violently from behind.
Then, in a fraction of a heartbeat, the fragile, beautiful silence of the void is instantly, totally obliterated. The impact is utterly catastrophic in its shocking suddenness. A solid, invisible, crushing wall of aggressively moving air, screaming ruthlessly across the flat earth at 200 miles an hour, slams violently into the unprepared western wall of the thatch hut. There is absolutely no gentle buildup. There is no rising, whistling warning to brace yourself. It is an instantaneous, explosive, kinetic collision. The deafening, world-ending roar detonates right against the exterior mud plaster, releasing an apocalyptic shriek that violently vibrates your teeth in your skull and physically, painfully compresses the very air inside your lungs. The violent, blinding, horizontal sheets of driving rain return with a furious, metallic vengeance, firing like endless, sweeping rounds of heavy musket shot against the suddenly drastically compressed western side of the roof. The sturdy, ancient, reliable structure reacts with a terrifying, violent structural shudder that ripples through every timber. The great, thick mahogany beams, which had been forced to lean heavily eastward for hours during the first half of the storm, are suddenly, viciously, mercilessly shoved in the exact opposite direction. A deep, agonizing, prolonged woody scream tears violently through the dark, trapped interior as the massive structural posts are forced to flex backward. You can hear their thick, ancient fibers desperately fighting against the sudden, inverted, terrifying gravity of the hurricane's back wall. The deeply saturated, heavy palm fronds on the western slope are instantaneously flattened, physically compressed into a rigid, overlapping, impenetrable armor of wet vegetation by the sheer, crushing, relentless pressure of the returning gale. Yet, even as the chaotic, swirling decibels reach an impossible, truly mind-numbing peak that threatens to break your sanity, the deeply soothing, grounding, immovable truth of the earth miraculously remains. The thick, baked mud does not shatter into dust. The tightly, expertly woven palm fibers do not violently tear away into the night. The humble hut leans dangerously far. It groans and screams in profound, unbelievable structural agony, but it holds its sacred ground. The violently destructive kinetic energy of the immense western wind is once again masterfully absorbed, intelligently diffused by the architecture, and smoothly forced to flow cleanly and harmlessly over the curved, aerodynamic, deeply organic shape of your earthen sanctuary.
Let the apocalyptic roar utterly deafen the terrified world outside. Let the ancient wooden structure scream its defiance into the wind. You are safely tucked away, buried deep inside the intensely fragrant, damp, heavy darkness. You are held fiercely, lovingly, and completely securely by the incredibly deep ancient roots of the island itself, resting in absolute physical safety as the brutal, unforgiving second half of the atmospheric monster fully releases its unending fury into the long, dark, churning Caribbean night. The noise surrounding you is no longer merely a sound processed by ears. It has violently become an entire, encompassing physical environment. It is a continuous, crushing, inescapable physical pressure that aggressively occupies every single inch of the pitch-black darkness. You are now resting motionlessly at the absolute, terrifying zenith of the storm's unfathomable power. Just inches away, outside those vibrating mud walls, the ancient, pitch-black jungle is being systematically, mercilessly dismantled down to the bedrock by the massive, invisible, screaming machinery of the wind. Even through the impenetrable, deafening, violently vibrating roar of the gale, the deeply visceral, sickeningly violent sounds of planetary destruction manage to bleed into the dark room. You clearly hear the sharp, deafening, heartbreaking crack of ancient, towering banyan and mahogany trees finally surrendering their grip on the earth. You can feel the seismic thud as their massive, heavily waterlogged trunks violently splinter and collapse under the impossible, relentless weight of the lateral wind. Then comes the terrifying barrage, the heavy, utterly chaotic, random impacts of massive airborne debris. Whole, heavy branches, massive clusters of torn, thick vines, and huge sheets of violently stripped bark are hurled blindly, with the speed of cannonballs, through the howling black void. They skip, they crash, and they violently tumble end over end across the deeply saturated, completely terrified earth, missing your low, sturdy shelter as the world above is completely unmade. Occasionally, a projectile, a heavy soaked mahogany pod or a splinter of wet wood strikes the tightly woven exterior of your roof. It hits with a dull, deflected thwump, instantly repelled by the masterful sloping architecture of the soaked palm fronds. The hut does not arrogantly fight the debris, it simply bows, allowing the chaotic shrapnel of the jungle to slide harmlessly over its rounded shoulders. Beneath the relentless, shrieking canopy of the wind, a new, deeper rhythm begins to assert itself from the darkness. It is a terrifying, magnificent pulse. The Atlantic Ocean, driven completely mad by the plunging pressure and the relentless eastern push, has abandoned its ancient sandy boundaries. The monstrous storm surge is pushing a towering wall of deep black seawater over the coastal reefs, drowning the beaches and marching relentlessly into the low-lying jungle. You can feel the colossal, terrifying weight of this displaced ocean. Every few seconds, a massive, rogue wave crashes into the flooded tree line mere hundreds of yards away. It is a heart-stopping seismic boom that travels directly through the saturated bedrock, rolling under the mud floor and resonating deep within the center of your chest. The deep sea has come to the jungle. The water is dangerously close. You can smell the bitter, churning salt spray mixing violently with the dark, loamy scent of the mud walls. Yet the earthen floor beneath you remains a steadfast anchor. The water does not reach your sanctuary. The heavy, rhythmic thud of the ocean waves crashing against the bruised earth only serves to highlight the incredible, stubborn resilience of your shelter. The central supports of the hut, those thick, hand-hewn trunks of cured island mahogany bear the absolute terrifying brunt of this atmospheric onslaught. They are caught in a relentless flexing tug of war with the sky, but they do not snap, they groan. Listen closely to the deep, guttural agony of the wood. It is a slow, resonant, continuous creak, a structural moan of immense endurance. The dense fibers of the mahogany stretch and compress in the dark, absorbing thousands of pounds of sheer lateral force. The wood translates the apocalyptic violence of the hurricane into a heavy acoustic vibration that hums endlessly through the dark room. It is the raw, vibrating sound of survival. The groaning wood and the deep thud of the encroaching ocean form a heavy, hypnotic lullaby of resilience. They are a continuous promise that the earth and the timber are stronger than the howling sky. Press your body deeper into the cool, yielding mud of the floor, feeling the immense, protective weight of the dark room wrapping around you. Let the ocean hammer the earth. Let the wind tear the sky apart. The world outside is dissolving into a chaotic soup of water and air. But in here, anchored to the mud and shielded by the groaning wood, you are perfectly, undeniably safe. Breathe into the heavy rhythm of the endurance and let the storm rage blindly above you. As the colossal weight of the storm continues to grind against the edges of the clearing, a profound and necessary shift begins to unfold within the quiet, dark space of your own mind. The sheer, overwhelming scale of the chaotic energy outside, the howling wind, the snapping timber, the rhythmic, thunderous beating of the encroaching ocean demands a deep, instinctual release from the burdens of resistance. You realize, with a long, heavy, peaceful sigh that slowly empties your lungs entirely, that there is absolutely nothing left for you to control in this moment. The world beyond these thick earthen walls is being systematically dismantled, erased, and rewritten by the blind, ancient hand of the hurricane, and you are simply a silent, sheltered witness tucked safely away from its magnificent restructuring. This profound realization does not bring an anxious fear. Instead, it brings a sudden, sweeping wave of absolute, comforting surrender. The desperate, exhausting human need to hold on to the rigid structures and worries of the waking world dissolves completely, washing away into the dark, wet soil beneath you. You let go. You allow your physical form to become entirely passive, your limbs growing incredibly heavy as you sink deeper and deeper into the cool, dark comfort of the yielding clay floor. The damp earth acts as a cold, soothing balm against your skin. It draws the very last lingering traces of nervous tension downward, pulling the heat from your exhausted muscles and burying it safely within the deep, unmoving bedrock of the island. You are tethered to the ground, rooted just as firmly as the ancient mahogany beams that groan and hum in the darkness above you. Your awareness pulls inward, shrinking away from the roaring sky and settling gently into the steady, rhythmic expansion and contraction of your own chest. Listen to the sound of your own survival. Beneath the thick, muffled roar of the tempest that is being continuously filtered and softened by the heavy thatch, there is the slow, quiet ocean of your own breath. Draw the cool, ozone-rich air in through your nose. Feel it fill your lungs, a vital, grounding force in the center of the chaos. Hold it for a slow, suspended moment in the dark, and then release it. Let it flow out into the damp room, joining the microscopic mist that floats in the enclosed space. With every slow, deliberate exhalation, you sink a fraction of an inch deeper into the comforting mud. Your heart rate, which had quickened with the explosive return of the wind, now begins to purposefully decelerate. It matches the slow, enduring geologic pulse of the island itself, beating with a calm, deliberate strength that the chaotic wind simply cannot touch. The violent friction of the atmosphere tearing itself apart outside becomes nothing more than a heavy, vibrating blanket of white noise. It is a protective acoustic dome that isolates you from the demands of tomorrow and the regrets of yesterday. There is only the here and the now. There is only the scent of the wet clay, the deep structural groaning of the protective timber, and the beautifully slow, steady rhythm of your breathing in the dark. You are a quiet, breathing stone resting securely at the bottom of a raging river. The torrential currents of air and water crash wildly far above your head, but down here, in the dark, heavy embrace of the dirt floor, the water is calm, the shadows are soft. You have surrendered to the terrifying majesty of the elements, and in that absolute surrender, you have found an untouchable, deeply rooted peace. Let the storm rewrite the earth. You are safe, heavy, and completely at rest. The hours have slowly, imperceptibly bled into one another, forming a dark, timeless ocean of deafening sound and crushing pressure. You have rested entirely submerged in this chaotic, swirling energy of the night, your conscious mind floating adrift, anchored only by the beautifully stubborn rhythm of your own slow, deliberate breathing and the heavy, damp, intensely grounding embrace of the earthen floor. But all things in this natural world, even the most magnificent, terrifying, and seemingly infinite expressions of the sky's absolute fury, must eventually exhaust themselves. The monolithic, impenetrable wall of the hurricane, having ruthlessly spent its colossal oceanic rage against the fragile curvature of the island, is finally, miraculously beginning to fracture. The change is not immediate, nor is it sudden, but it is deeply, undeniably felt in the very marrow of your resting bones. The sheer, crushing barometric weight that is pressed so aggressively against your eardrums for what feels like an eternity begins to slowly, gradually, beautifully lift. It is a microscopic easing of a planetary grip. The thick, suffocating atmosphere of the room is physically unclenching. The continuous, deafening roar of the gale, a sound so absolute, so dense that it had long ago become a physical, heavy presence occupying the room, starts to noticeably stutter. It loses its terrifying, impenetrable consistency, finally breaking apart into individual, ragged, exhausted gusts of wind that sweep heavily over the soaked roof, and then, mercifully, pass on into the dark, leaving an expanding wake of quiet behind them. With every passing moment, the peak of the wind's pitch drops a massive octave. The shrieking, violent, high-frequency friction that tore mercilessly at the outside world softens considerably into a deep, hollow, resonant moan, and then, slowly, into a long, drawn-out, utterly exhausted sigh. The ancient hand-hewn mahogany beams that fiercely support your sanctuary, which have been groaning, twisting, and vibrating in pure, sustained structural agony for untold hours, slowly and gratefully cease their desperate backward flexing. The deep, agonizing, woody creaks finally subside, replaced by the microscopic clicking sounds of cooling timber. The massive wooden pillars settle heavily, deeply back into the saturated earth, finding their natural, incredibly stable center of gravity once more. The terrifying, continuous vibration that had been humming through the wet mud floor simply melts away, leaving behind a perfectly still, unmoving foundation. The mad Atlantic Ocean, too, is finally sounding its retreat. The terrifying, rhythmic, earth-shattering booming of the massive storm surge, those giant seismic thuds of rogue waves that shook the very limestone bedrock beneath you, begins to noticeably space out, growing fainter, softer, and more distant with every passing minute. The heavy, black seawater is actively draining back through the pulverized, tangled roots of the flooded jungle, a massive, retreating tide slowly returning to the fathomless deep. The horizontal, violent, blinding pelting of the rain against the western thatch entirely loses its blind, desperate aggression. The driving, metallic sheets of water shatter into a disorganized, tired vertical shower, and then fade entirely into a gentle patter, leaving behind only the soft, erratic, incredibly peaceful dripping of the deeply saturated trees outside. As the suffocating, heavy acoustic blanket of the great storm finally dissolves into the ether, a profound, fragile, and intensely beautiful peace begins to slowly steep the enclosed space of your sanctuary. The lingering, invisible tension completely drains from your exhausted muscles, sinking into the floor like heavy water disappearing into dry sand. You feel your limbs become completely, blissfully paralyzed by the sudden, overwhelming safety of the aftermath. And then, as you lie surrendered to the mud, the most subtle, magnificent transformation of all begins to occur. The absolute, impenetrable, claustrophobic blackness of the long night begins, ever so slightly, to thin. It is an incredibly slow, creeping, hesitant dilution of the dark. It is not the bright, triumphant, golden sunrise of a clear, calm, tropical morning. It is a heavily bruised, eerie, intensely atmospheric slate-gray luminescence that slowly, stubbornly pushes its way through the swollen, weeping, low-hanging clouds. This fragile, newborn light gently presses against the battered exterior of the humble hut, softly searching for a way inside. The thick, woven palm fronds above you have miraculously survived the onslaught, but they have been brutally battered, violently shifted, and significantly thinned by the endless, tearing friction of the night's wind. Through these microscopic, newly formed, ragged crevices in the deeply wet thatch, tiny, delicate, impossibly beautiful shafts of pale gray morning light finally pierce the gloom. These soft, hazy columns of gray light drift downward, brilliantly illuminating the fine, atomized mist and the heavy, settling dust that still hang magically suspended in the deeply cooled air of the room. Slowly, like a photograph developing in a dark room, the internal geography of your steadfast sanctuary is gently revealed to your waking eyes. The thick, mud-plastered walls emerge silently from the heavy shadows, their uneven surfaces now stained a deep, rich charcoal black, slick and shining with the immense amount of moisture they have absorbed. The heavy wooden supports slowly take their massive shape, standing like deeply scarred, intensely proud, silent guardians watching over you in the eerie, quiet dawn. The violent, screaming monster of the night is truly gone. In its devastating wake, it has left only a gentle, haunting, deeply apologetic breeze. It is an incredibly soft, mournful exhalation directly from the bruised, exhausted sky, drifting slowly and aimlessly through the utterly devastated jungle outside. It slips quietly through the torn gaps in the damp, heavy palm leaves, offering a cool, gentle, deeply forgiving caress against your resting face. It carries with it a new, intoxicating perfume, the overwhelmingly clean, incredibly sharp, crushed scent of millions of pulverized green leaves, freshly exposed tree sap, deeply washed, overturned ancient earth, and the distant, fading, bitter salt of the retreating sea. You lie completely, effortlessly still on the miraculously soft, cool mud, bathed from above in the gentle, filtering gray light, breathing in the quiet, absolute, overwhelming relief of the newly born morning. The great storm has finally broken. The island has endured the wrath of the heavens. The world has survived its own unmaking, and you are entirely, perfectly, unshakably at peace. The pale, bruised, slate-colored light continues to slowly pool and expand on the damp earthen floor, forming soft, glowing puddles of illumination, a quiet, undeniable testament to the morning that has finally, mercifully arrived. The long, terrifying, seemingly endless night is definitively over. Through the small, ragged, torn openings in the heavily battered thatch above, the true, mind-bending scale of the storm's magnificent, terrible, awe-inspiring power is slowly, gently revealed to the waking world. The familiar world outside these thick mud walls has been entirely, violently rewritten by the invisible hand of the wind. The dense, towering, completely impenetrable jungle canopy that stood so proudly just yesterday has been aggressively, ruthlessly sheared away. Towering, ancient mahogany and banyan trees, proud giants that have stood for centuries, have been snapped like completely fragile, dry twigs, their incredibly deep, grasping roots violently torn and exposed from the deeply saturated, wounded soil. The once familiar landscape is now a vast, tangled, deeply bruised canvas of crushed, bleeding green and deeply overturned dark brown earth, profoundly humbled and forever altered by the immense, unstoppable breath of the sky. Miles and miles away, down on the brutalized, unrecognizable coast, where the great, sprawling colonial estates once stood in arrogant, wealthy, geometric defiance against the wild landscape, there is now only a profound, quiet ruin. Those massive, imposing, alien structures, built with desperate hubris of heavy, unyielding imported stone, thick iron, and rigid mortar, foolishly tried to fight the ancient god of the hurricane. They stood utterly rigid, chest out against the colossal, screaming wind, entirely convinced of their own permanence. They stubbornly, blindly refused to bend to the will of the sky. And under the crushing, unimaginable, continuous pressure of the tempest's eye wall, their very rigidity became their absolute doom. Their thick, heavy, immovable walls inevitably fractured into 1,000 jagged pieces and violently fell, returning to the dust from which they were carved. Their proud, deep-set, imported foundations were scoured clean and washed blindly, carelessly into the churning, dark belly of the retreating sea, leaving behind no trace of their fleeting, defiant existence. But here, miles inland, safely tucked away in the quiet, deeply isolated, breathing heart of the jungle clearing, your incredibly humble earthen sanctuary remains beautifully, perfectly whole. This simple, miraculously organic vessel of packed river mud, crushed coral, and intricately woven palm did not arrogantly attempt to conquer the raging storm, did not stand in foolish opposition. It inherently knew the incredibly ancient, deep, indigenous wisdom of the island itself. It yielded when it needed to yield. It flexed under the impossible weight. It groaned in absolute agony in the pitch dark, respectfully bowing deeply and willingly to the overwhelming, magnificent power of angry nature, masterfully allowing the furious, chaotic, deadly wind to simply slide harmlessly over its incredibly soft, curved, aerodynamic shoulders. It survived not through stubborn strength, but through brilliant, submissive harmony. By surrendering entirely, completely, and without ego to the terrifying majesty of the elements, the little unassuming thatch hut beautifully survived the absolute greatest fury the natural world has ever seen fit to unleash. And by consciously, willingly surrendering your own internal resistance, letting go of your human anxiety, your fear, and your desperate need for control, you too have magnificently, beautifully weathered the darkest, most terrifying night of the century. You are completely, undeniably wholly safe, resting peacefully within the incredibly resilient, actively breathing architecture of the very earth itself. The damp, cooling mud floor holds your heavy weight with absolute, unwavering devotion. The scarred, ancient mahogany wooden beams stand tall and watch over your resting form like incredibly silent, steadfast sentinels guarding a precious, quiet treasure. As the slate-gray dawn continues to slowly bleed through the battered roof, a single, incredibly solitary sound gently breaks the vast, sweeping, heavy silence of the utterly ruined jungle outside. It is a tiny, impossibly delicate, highly tentative chirp from a miraculously surviving bird, huddled and hidden somewhere deep within the deeply bruised, tangled, dripping foliage. It is a small, unimaginably brave sound of life asserting itself against the apocalypse. Then, a long, breathless moment later, from entirely across the devastated clearing, another tiny melodic chirp softly answers the call in the mist. Life, incredibly stubborn and deeply resilient, is slowly, cautiously returning to the battered, bruised island. The gentle, newly cooled morning wind weakly rustles the few remaining heavily waterlogged palm leaves still clinging to the canopy, sounding exactly like an incredibly soft, deeply apologizing whisper from the exhausted sky. The incredibly rich air you draw deeply into your lungs is impossibly, unbelievably clean, scrubbed and washed absolutely pure by a billion heavy gallons of torrential rain, heavily infused with the sharp ozone of the storm and the deep, heavy, healing salt of the slowly retreating ocean. You have absolutely, completely nothing left to do in this quiet, newborn world. The great, terrifying ordeal is entirely behind you now, rapidly fading into the silent pages of deep history. The heavy, damp earth directly beneath your deeply tired, heavy body is wonderfully cool, richly thick, and incredibly, unshakably solid. Your breathing is immensely deep. It is incredibly, rhythmically slow, a quiet ocean of its own. It smoothly, effortlessly matches the calm, deeply peaceful, recovering rhythm of the bruised, gentle new dawn. The filtering slate-gray light is impossibly soft on your closed eyelids. The terrifying, world-ending danger is completely, irrevocably gone, banished with the dark. The incredibly heavy, intensely damp, fragrant air wraps you entirely in a deeply comforting maternal embrace. Let go entirely of the waking morning. Let the chaotic, ruined images of the battered world outside simply melt and fade away into the comforting shadows. Sink deeper, ever deeper, into the quiet, dark, unconditionally loving earth beneath you. You are deeply, profoundly, permanently sheltered from the storms of life. You are perfectly, completely, unequivocally safe in this heavy, quiet dark. There is nothing but pure, unadulterated peace left in the universe. Rest now, deeply and without fear. Sleep. Yet amidst the magnificent ruin, there is a profound, dripping stillness, a deeply silent promise of rebirth anchored in the rich, wet earth beneath you, whispering that the storm has passed and you are safe to simply close your eyes, drift away, and finally, deeply sleep.